The prison was already on edge when the first scream shattered the hallway. It came from behind the thick steel door of therapy room 3B in cell block E, a room that was supposed to be safe. Guard Peterson dropped his half-eaten apple and sprinted toward the sound, radio crackling at his hip. Inside, the scene froze him cold. Dr. Marlene Royce, the prison's senior trauma therapist, was lying face down on the linoleum floor. Her once crisp white blouse was soaked in blood, a jagged piece of broken mirror jutting from her neck like a cruel trophy. Her lifeless eyes stared out at nothing. And kneeling beside her was Darren Kale. The inmate's hands were red. His face calm. Too calm. He turned slowly toward the guard like he'd been waiting for someone to find him. There was no panic. No regret. She said no, Darren murmured. So I helped her understand. Before the alarm could even finish blaring, the prison lockdown began. Inmates were thrown into cells. The warden called the FBI. And the name Darren Kale was written in a red marker on every board in the facility. But this wasn't just a murder. It was the end of a secret. One that had been hidden for almost a year. Why would a respected therapist fall for an inmate? What did Darren mean when he said she understood? And how did nobody see this coming? We'll get there. But first, let's rewind. To the beginning. Welcome to Silent Crime Witness. If this is your first time here, make sure to hit that subscribe button right now. Drop a like on this video and comment below where you're watching from. Your support allows us to continue bringing these important stories to light. 7 months earlier, Marlene Royce still believed she had everything under control. Her mornings started at 6 a.m. sharp, green smoothie, a jog around the quiet neighborhood of Ashwood Pines, and 30 minutes of meditation while her husband, Alan, typed away at his campaign briefs in the study. Their marriage was quiet, neat, almost scripted. Alan was the kind of man who scheduled date nights 3 weeks in advance and sent emails instead of leaving notes. He loved her, she knew, but not in a way she could feel. Not anymore. That Monday morning was no different until she got the call. It was from Warden Holbrook, the kind of call that never came unless something was already breaking apart. Marlene, I need you to take on a new inmate. Darren Kale. He's just been transferred from Folsom. Level 3, behavior flagged as volatile, but he's eligible for the trauma rehabilitation program. Nobody else is willing to touch his file. She should have said no. But she didn't. Maybe it was because the warden trusted her. Maybe because she wanted to prove to herself she was still the best. Or maybe, though she'd never admit it aloud, she was just curious. The file landed on her desk that afternoon. Thick. Messy. Pages of psychological reports, criminal history, incident logs, even a hand-scrawled note from a therapist in Folsom. He knows how to mirror emotions. Be careful, he'll make you think he's healing just to watch you fall. Her eyes paused at the mugshot. He was younger than she expected. Mid-30s. A face that could have belonged to a man in sales or tech if not for the quiet menace behind his eyes. No tattoos. No chains. Just that look. As if he was already inside her head reading her through the photo. The next day, he walked into her office 5 minutes early. Hands cuffed. Shoulders relaxed. Good afternoon, Dr. Royce. She looked up from her notepad. You're early. I like to make a good first impression. There was something in his voice, smooth but sharp. Like velvet hiding a blade. She asked the usual questions. He gave the usual answers. Childhood trauma. Parental neglect. Foster care. Juvenile detention. Armed robbery. Violence. Solitude. A whole life sketched in pain and quiet rage. But then came the part she didn't expect. He turned to her, steady, serious. Do you believe people can change? She gave her textbook answer yes, with the right tools and support. But he wasn't asking hypothetically. He was asking her for real. And she could feel it. The weight of it. Only if someone makes them want to, he said. She wrote that down, then underlined it. Twice. And as she closed the session and signaled for the guard to escort him out, she caught her own reflection in the glass of the office door. Her expression was soft. Curious. Too soft. The next session he brought a sketch with him. A simple drawing of a bird inside a cage looking out. He slid it onto her desk like it was nothing. Just something I was working on. Is that how you feel? She asked. Not really. It just reminded me of you. That night, she couldn't sleep. Not because of the comment, but because of how it made her feel. By the 3rd week, he started asking her questions. What's your favorite color? Do you ever dream of disappearing? What would you be if you weren't a therapist? She answered them. Not because she had to, but because she wanted to. Because no one had asked her those things in years. Alan never asked about her dreams. He asked about polls, approvals, calendars. And she answered those too. Like a good wife. Like a good placeholder. But Darren? Darren asked what her laugh sounded like when she was 17. What her favorite song was when she danced alone in her room. He didn't care about her credentials. He cared about the pieces of her she didn't know were still alive. When Janine caught her smiling at her phone one afternoon, she raised a brow. Who's texting you? No one, Marlene said too quickly. It wasn't Darren. He didn't have a phone. But he had ways. Notes slipped into files. Drawings hidden inside therapy logs. Once even a pressed flower from the prison courtyard. She should have reported it. She didn't. She told herself it was just part of the work. Part of his process. But part of her knew she was lying. It wasn't just sympathy anymore. It wasn't clinical. It was something else. Something dangerous. And the more she ignored it, the louder it became. When she finally told Darren about her marriage, about Alan, his face didn't even twitch. You're not happy. I didn't say that. You didn't have to. He leaned in. Too close. I'd never let you be unhappy. If you were mine, I'd remind you every day that you were wanted. She stood up. Fast. That's enough, Darren. He smiled. Not sheepishly. Confidently. Like he knew the line she had just drawn and how close she had come to crossing it. The next day, she wore a blouse that wasn't buttoned to her throat. Her hair was softer. Her lipstick had a tint of red. She told herself it was coincidence. It wasn't. When Alan noticed her distance, he tried. Took her to dinner. Asked if she needed space. But his eyes were tired. His touch mechanical. She felt like a ghost in her own house. But in Darren's sketches, she was vivid. Alive. Free. She should have stopped it. Then and there. But she didn't. And one day, without warning, the sketches stopped. Instead, he came into the session with nothing. No words. No warmth. When she asked what was wrong, he only said, "You don't look at me the same." Marlene swallowed. We crossed a line. I let it get too far. This is over. For a moment, he said nothing. Then he smiled, slow and bitter. You really think you get to walk away now? She filed for a leave of absence the next day. Alan didn't ask why. She left the prison quietly with no explanations. No final sessions. Just a heavy silence. But secrets don't stay buried in prison. An obsession doesn't take no for an answer. Especially not when it thinks it still has time. It was a quiet Friday when she returned to the facility just for her belongings, that's all. A quick stop to clear her desk, hand over her pass card, and sign the final paperwork. She hadn't planned to speak to anyone, especially not him. She hadn't even told Alan she was going back. She parked in the visitor's lot, heartbeat pounding against her ribs like a warning bell. The air felt different, thicker, heavier. As if something was waiting. Watching. Inside, the halls of cell block E buzzed with their usual low hum of electricity and tension. A few guards nodded as she walked past. Some looked away. She didn't notice. Her mind was already racing through the checklist, files, personal notes, the mug she kept for tea, a cardigan she left draped over the office chair. She opened the door to her office, but something was off. There was a photo on her desk. One that hadn't been there before. It was her at home in the backyard watering the plants. Taken from behind the fence. Her blood ran cold. The room felt like it was shrinking around her. Her throat tightened. She turned, heart-thudding, ready to scream for help. But then she saw the envelope taped to the inside of the door. It had one word written in a jagged hand. Decide. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Inside was a note. You said you loved order. I've waited long enough. You leave him or you stay here with me. Forever. She stumbled back, bumping into her chair. He knew she'd come. He planned this. She snatched her phone, thumb trembling as she dialed security. But the line didn't ring. No service. She bolted out of the room, nearly crashing into Janine. Marlene? What's wrong? Before she could answer, the lights flickered. Once. Twice. Then the emergency sirens wailed. A full lockdown. The automated voice came next. Lockdown initiated. Please remain in your designated zones. All doors are sealed. The doors slammed with metallic finality. Janine's eyes widened. What the hell is happening? Marlene grabbed her wrist. He's here. He's not in his cell. How do you know that? Because he left me a picture from my backyard. They ran. Past the break room. Past the holding cells. Toward the central watchtower. But they didn't make it. Halfway there, the lights went out completely. Darkness swallowed the hallway. A voice echoed through the silence. Not over the intercom. Closer. Personal. You came back for me, Marlene. Just like I knew you would. She froze. Janine grabbed her hand. Move. But Marlene didn't move. Because she saw him. Standing at the end of the hallway, bathed in the red glow of the emergency backup lights. No cuffs. No guards. Just him. Holding something sharp. She backed away slowly, shielding Janine behind her. Darren. Don't do this. You made a promise, he whispered, stepping closer. You said I could change. You can. But not like this. He stopped 2 steps away. I didn't kill him, Marlene. She blinked, confused. What? Your husband, he said softly. I wanted to. God, I wanted to. But I didn't. I thought if I showed you I could wait, maybe you'd finally see. Her breath caught in her throat. What did you do? Darren tilted his head. You still love him? She hesitated. And that was all it took. His expression shifted. The softness dropped. The rage returned. And before she could scream, he lunged. But the screen goes black there. Because the truth of what happened next day. That part comes later. For now, we rewind again. To Darren. Before the prison. Before the obsession. Before the first kill. Before the prison, Darren Kale was invisible. He worked nights as a dishwasher at a diner off Route 27, slept days in a room that reeked of old paint and broken promises. His mattress lay directly on the floor, springs poking out like teeth. The light bulb overhead flickered constantly, but he never fixed it. He didn't care. He hadn't cared in a long time. He had a mother once, though he couldn't remember the last time she called. He had a brother too, Mason, but they hadn't spoken in 8 years, not since the night Darren showed up bleeding on his porch and Mason shut the door without saying a word. Most days, Darren went through the motions. Chop, scrub, stack, repeat. On his breaks, he sat on an upside-down crate and stared out at the dumpsters, smoking cheap cigarettes he didn't even like. He didn't talk much. Didn't laugh. Didn't dream. And then came Cassidy. She worked the register part-time, new girl, soft-spoken, always wore a blue ribbon in her hair. Darren noticed that first. Not her smile. Not her eyes. The ribbon. Something about it felt peaceful. She was kind to him. That was her first mistake. Hi, Darren, she said one day, just like that. Like they were equals. Like she wasn't afraid of him. He didn't know what to say back. So he nodded. The second mistake was when she gave him a Christmas card. He hadn't gotten one in 10 years. Inside was a small note. You're stronger than you think. That was it. No number. No heart drawn beside her name. Just a line of warmth in a life that had long gone cold. He started watching her after that. Not in a creepy way at first. Just watching. Her routines. How she tucked her hair behind her ear. The way she always gave extra napkins to customers with kids. The way she never looked rushed even when the line stretched out the door. He convinced himself it was harmless. But one night, he followed her home. Just to make sure she was safe. That was the story he told himself. She lived in a small yellow house with wind chimes that sang in the wind. He stood across the street, hidden behind a row of hedges, and watched her open the front door. A man stepped out, older, tall, confident. He kissed her cheek. Husband? Boyfriend? Darren didn't know. Didn't want to know. He clenched his fists so hard his nails cut into his palm. She deserved better. Someone who saw her heart, not just her body. Someone who knew how rare she was. Someone who wouldn't treat her like a convenience. He stayed longer than he meant to. Every night. Watching. Waiting. Planning. Until the night he crossed the street. She screamed when she saw him on the porch. He didn't mean to scare her. He just wanted to talk. To explain. To show her he was serious. But the man, her husband, rushed out. Pushed Darren back. Told him to get lost. That was when it snapped. The calm. The control. The part of him that tried so hard to be human. He reached into his coat, pulled the small blade he always kept close, just in case. Not to use. Never to use. Until that moment. He stabbed the man once. Twice. Then again. The screams blurred into the sound of sirens. By the time the police came, he was still standing there, holding the knife. When they cuffed him, he didn't resist. But as they shoved his head into the back of the car, he said one thing. She should have waited for me. The trial was fast. The evidence clear. Open and shut, they said. 25 years, no parole. They moved him from county lockup to Folsom, then eventually to San Ledge Correctional after the incident with the guard. He didn't cry. Didn't argue. Didn't speak. Not until he saw Marlene. The way she carried herself. The sadness in her eyes. The ring on her finger that didn't match her face. That was when it started again. The story. The obsession. The belief. He wasn't evil. He was misunderstood. And maybe, just maybe, this time would be different. Maybe this time someone would choose him. The news of Marlene's death hit the prison like a thunderclap. It wasn't just another staff incident. It wasn't a scuffle or an inmate prank gone too far. It was blood on the therapy floor. It was a dead woman with a doctorate and a husband in politics lying cold on institutional linoleum. The guards were rattled. Most had worked with her for years. Some had called her the glue of cell block E. She knew everyone's name, never raised her voice, gave hope to men the world had already thrown away. But none of that saved her. The warden locked down the facility. He brought in external investigators, a special unit from the state. Cameras were reviewed. Logs were pulled. Every single guard who had been on duty that day was questioned. Twice. Some even suspended. But Darren? Darren didn't say a word. They found him kneeling beside her, the blood still warm on his hands, the mirror shard sticky in his grip. He looked up, calm as ever. She said she was going back to him, he whispered. So I made sure she stayed. In interrogation, he gave them nothing. No remorse. No excuses. He just stared past the detectives like they weren't real. They tried to trace how he got the mirror. That room hadn't had a mirror for months, not since another inmate tried to gouge out his own eyes. The working theory? He must have broken a reflective clipboard from the janitorial cart. But no one knew for sure. And somehow, during all this, he'd bypassed 2 security doors, both requiring clearance codes. Someone had helped him. But who? That was the new question. Because Darren wasn't smart enough to override security protocols. He wasn't crafty. He wasn't trained. He was a broken man running on obsession. So who was behind the door unlocks? Who wanted Marlene dead as much as Darren wanted her to stay? A month later, the internal review leaked something strange. An anonymous message had been sent to Darren's inmate tablet 24 hours before the murder. It was erased immediately after being read. But the metadata remained. The file name? She's going back to him. The tech team traced it to a terminal used inside the administrative wing. Staff-only access. Which meant someone on the inside had lit the match. Detective Elgin was the first to say it aloud. This wasn't just a crime of passion. Someone made sure it would happen. He pulled the visitor logs, reviewed phone call records, requested financials for every prison staff member from the past 3 years. And that's when he found it. Janine had 2 mortgages. One on her house, one on a lakefront cabin in another state. No one knew about the second one, not even her wife. That cabin had been paid off in full 2 weeks after Marlene's sabbatical began. And the deposit? Cash. No source. No explanation. When they brought Janine in for questioning, she looked stunned. Played the friend. Cried. Swore she had nothing to do with it. But then they showed her the call logs. The burner phone. The anonymous transfer to Darren's account, $10. A message embedded in the payment note. Room 3B. 2 p.m. Door will be open. Janine cracked. I didn't think he'd actually kill her, she whispered. I just wanted to scare her. Make her leave. Why? She was going to ruin everything. Her husband was about to get appointed to the state ethics board. She was going to tell him everything. About her and Darren. About what really happened that night she disappeared. Alan would have buried her. And me too. Detective Elgin sat back, stunned. So you handed her over? She was already halfway in, Janine said bitterly. She chose him. I just gave her the final push. Darren was moved to solitary. But even there he smiled. Because in his mind it had worked. She didn't go back to her husband. She stayed. Forever. But the story wasn't done. Because someone else had been watching all along. Another inmate. Someone with a reason to keep Darren talking. And a deal already brewing on the outside. His name was Warren Blake. 38 years old. Former con artist turned lifer. Serving time for orchestrating a multimillion-dollar Ponzi scheme that ruined the retirement savings of over 40 families. But Warren wasn't just a thief. He was a talker. A listener. The kind of man who learned more in silence than most did with words. And he'd been listening to Darren since day one. They shared a cell block for 8 months before Darren was moved to the therapy wing. Warren watched how he walked, who he spoke to, when he smiled. It didn't take long to figure out Darren wasn't just another lonely convict. He was a slow burn fuse. When the news broke about Dr. Royce's murder, Warren didn't flinch. He waited. Then 2 weeks into Darren's solitary stint, he made a call. Not to family, not to a lawyer, but to a name that hadn't come up in years. He called Evelyn Kale, Darren's mother, the woman who once told the courts she wished she'd never had a son. Her voice crackled through the prison phone. Dry, tired, suspicious. I don't want anything to do with him, she snapped. You hear me? That boy ruined everything. I already buried my name once. Warren leaned back, calm as always. I understand. But this isn't about you forgiving him. It's about you surviving what comes next. She hesitated. Keep talking. He smiled. I know things. I know why he killed her. I know who helped him. And I know something even your boy doesn't. He paused for effect. There's a journal. Dr. Royce kept one. Hidden. And if what I think is in there gets out, well, let's just say your son won't be the only one going down. Silence. Then Evelyn whispered, what do you want? A favor, Warren replied. One small favor that could make this all disappear. The next day, Warren made another call. This time to a local journalist, one who'd been poking around the case from day one. A woman named Cassie Lowell. Sharp, persistent, and known for turning rumors into headlines. He told her just enough. Just enough to bring her back into the prison for an interview. She thought she was getting the inside scoop on Darren Kale. She had no idea she was stepping into something deeper. Cassie arrived with her recorder, her notebook, her carefully practiced smile. Warren met her in the visitation room, chained but charming. I'll give you your headline, he said. But first, you have to promise me something. No promises, she shot back. Truth first. He nodded slowly. All right, here's your truth. He leaned forward. Darren didn't start this. He's just where it ends. She blinked. What are you talking about? Warren grinned. There's more blood on the floor than you think. And Dr. Royce? She wasn't just his therapist. She was keeping secrets for someone else. Someone powerful. Someone who needed her to disappear. Cassie scribbled in her notebook. You're saying Darren was used? I'm saying, Warren said, that sometimes the person holding the knife didn't choose to hold it. The room went quiet. And Cassie knew, deep in her gut, this wasn't just a murder. It was a setup. One that hadn't finished unfolding yet. Later that night, in the silence of solitary, Darren sat on the edge of his cot. He hadn't eaten in 2 days. He hadn't spoken in 3. But he was thinking. Not about Marlene. Not even about the kill. He was thinking about something she once whispered to him back when they still sat face to face, alone in the therapy room. You ever wonder what kind of person you'd be if you'd been loved properly? He had. Every day. And now? Now he wondered what kind of person she might have been if she hadn't lied. Because Darren had read her journal. Every word. And he knew. She hadn't told the whole truth. Not to her husband. Not to the warden. Not even to herself. And in the pages of that leather-bound book, he'd found something that changed everything. A name. A date. And a confession. One that didn't belong to him. And he wasn't done yet. Cassie Lowell couldn't sleep after the interview. She sat in her apartment, the city buzzing just beyond the balcony, but her thoughts were stuck inside the prison walls. Warren's words looped in her mind like a broken tape. Darren didn't start this. He's just where it ends. She had the notes. She had the recording. But what she didn't have was proof. Not yet. So she did what any real journalist would do. She followed the smoke. The next morning, she visited Marlene Royce's former neighborhood. A quiet, upper-middle-class street lined with manicured hedges and identical mailboxes. Picture perfect, just like her life was supposed to be. She rang the bell of the Royce home, notebook in hand, recorder tucked in her jacket pocket. Alan Royce opened the door, his eyes bloodshot, collar loose. The campaign posters that once filled the front window were gone. She introduced herself and explained she was working on a feature story, an inside look at the tragedy behind the headlines. A story that would honor his wife's work. He hesitated, then stepped aside. The living room was dim. Dust gathered on shelves. A wedding photo sat crooked on the mantel. She didn't deserve what happened to her, Alan said, voice flat. I agree, Cassie replied. But I don't think the full truth has come out. His eyes narrowed. I read the court release. Darren Kale confessed. They caught him at the scene. There's no mystery here. Cassie leaned forward. Did you know she was keeping a journal? Alan blinked. No. She never mentioned it. She wrote everything in it, Cassie said softly. Notes. Sessions. Fears. Names. Alan went still. What names? She didn't just write about Darren. There was someone else. Someone she was afraid of. Someone who could make people disappear. His hands curled into fists. Where is it? I don't know yet, she lied. But I'm close. That was the first time Cassie realized Alan wasn't grieving like a husband. He was grieving like a man watching something unravel. She left his house with more questions than answers. That night, Cassie received a message from an unknown number. Meet me where the wind doesn't whisper. Attached was a location pin. The old library on Braxton Street. Abandoned for years. Closed off after a fire. No surveillance. No security. She arrived with pepper spray in her coat and a flashlight in her hand. The front door was cracked open. Inside, dust danced in beams of moonlight. Rows of bookshelves still stood, scorched and forgotten. In the back corner, someone waited. Warren Blake. He wasn't supposed to be out of prison. But there he was, hands in his pockets, calm as ever. "I made a deal," he said before she could ask. "Temporary release under supervised cooperation." "Supervised by who?" she asked. "Doesn't matter. They want this story buried. I don't." He pulled out a small brown notebook. "I copied every page of Marlene's journal before they shut down her office. Had a guy inside sweep the place before the feds came." Cassie's hands shook as she took it. He didn't say goodbye. He just disappeared back into the shadows. She flipped through the pages, each one messier than the last. Session notes. Personal thoughts. And then, a page stained in red ink, the words rushed and desperate. "He knows. He said if I tell Alan, everything burns. I think he has someone inside. Maybe Janine. I don't trust anyone anymore." Cassie sat down right there on the floor. Because below that paragraph was a name. Detective Grant Elgin. The same detective leading the current investigation. The same man who arrested Darren. The same man who vouched for Janine's cooperation. Cassie's breath caught in her throat. Elgin was dirty. Maybe worse. And if he was involved, if he helped orchestrate this, it wasn't just about Darren or Marlene anymore. It was about power, cover-ups, control, and somewhere in the middle of it all was a woman who had fallen for the wrong man. A man who might not have been lying when he said, "She should have chosen me." Back in solitary, Darren pressed his ear to the wall. He heard the guard's footsteps. He counted them. He waited, because he knew Cassie had the journal now, and that meant it was time for his story to be heard. Not through interviews, not through whispers, but through a final act. One the whole world would watch. Cassie Lowell knew they were watching her now. 2 black SUVs had circled her apartment block twice that morning. Her editor stopped returning her calls. And the police department issued a quiet statement: "Detective Elgin has taken a leave of absence for personal reasons." But Cassie wasn't backing down. The journal was real. The recordings were real. And Darren Kale, twisted as he was, had never lied about the firestorm sitting beneath the surface of Marlene Royce's murder. She uploaded the first page of the journal to her private server and scheduled it for automatic release. Just in case. Then she packed her bag and drove straight to San Ledge Correctional with one goal: get Darren's full confession on video. Not for the police. Not for a courtroom. For the world. Darren was already waiting in the visitation room. Unchained. No guards in sight. He smiled when he saw her. "Cassie Lowell," he said softly, "you're braver than she was." Cassie set up her recorder. "Tell me everything. From the beginning. Leave nothing out." Darren leaned in, calm as ever. "Marlene wasn't supposed to fall for me. That part wasn't planned. She was supposed to keep me contained, reformed, quiet. But she got sloppy. She started writing things down about her husband's donors, about Janine, about Elgin." He paused. "She tried to save me. But once she realized how deep it went, she tried to save herself too." Cassie didn't blink. "And you killed her anyway." Darren looked up at the ceiling. "I didn't have a choice. Someone would have done it if I didn't. They let me be the monster because I already looked like one." Cassie's heart thudded. "Are you saying you were set up?" "I'm saying," Darren whispered, "the prison was never the cage. She was. And the moment she tried to escape it, they needed someone to shut the door." Cassie stood. "Why are you telling me this now?" Darren smiled. "Because it's already too late for all of them." At that exact moment, the fire alarms screamed through San Ledge Correctional. Red lights flashed. Metal doors slammed. Cassie dropped her recorder. Outside, 3 explosions echoed through the walls. The lights died. Guards screamed. Prisoners roared. The facility went dark. And Darren? He stood up, slow and graceful, like a man already free. Cassie turned to run, but the door behind her was sealed. She was locked inside. "I told you," Darren said, stepping closer, "my story wasn't over." He leaned in. "But yours is just beginning." Cassie's breath caught in her throat. And then the emergency siren cut through the chaos. "Prison breach. Code black. All personnel evacuate." Outside, helicopters were already circling. Fires lit up the horizon. Sirens wailed from every direction. Inside the walls, inmates flooded into corridors meant to hold them in. But someone had paid off the right guard. Darren was gone before the smoke cleared. By the time they got Cassie out, she was unconscious. Her recorder? Still running, with Darren's voice etched forever into its memory. The next day, the headlines exploded. Therapist murdered. Inmate escapes in chaos. Police under investigation. And in the middle of it all, a video appeared online, posted anonymously, titled simply, "The Truth About Marlene Royce." It had over 4 million views by midnight. And Darren Kale? He hadn't been seen since. Some say he fled the country. Others say he's dead. But there are rumors, a whisper in the wind, that he's watching every reporter, every cop, every politician who once sat quietly while they built a prison out of secrets. And when the next journal surfaces, it won't just be Marlene's name in it. This is Silent Crime Witness, where truth walks the line between justice and obsession. Subscribe, like, and tell us in the comments what you think really happened that night in room 3B. We'll be back tomorrow with another story.